Long ago, there was a wise and wealthy king who helped the entire population of his kingdom. His work was so admired that his name can be seen in various passages of the Bible. King Solomon was a man who had a great connection with God and was also the first to build a temple of worship in Jerusalem. His rule, considered very wise, resulted in him receiving tons of gold per year, making him one of the wealthiest, if not the wealthiest, figures in history. But his relationship with his more than 1,000 wives led him to lose everything he had gained. In the end, his grand palace and his great temple were obliterated, extinguished by other peoples. In today's video, we will discuss 7 principles of King Solomon. But before that, let's summarize a brief history of his reign and his journey. If you're not subscribed to the channel yet, go ahead and subscribe now so you don't miss any of our videos. Today we're going to talk about the man considered the wisest and wealthiest in biblical history. Believe it or not, he had a fortune estimated at $2.8 trillion. This information was taken from a series of sites, including the most reliable economic sites, such as magazines, because we're in an internet age. So we researched these sites online to get this information. All the wealth they say Solomon possessed is very plausible, because at that time some kings of Egypt also had such great wealth, so it's quite possible that Solomon achieved this. Remember, he was a great king whose fame preceded him, so let's get started with this video. I'll ask you right off the bat for about 30,000 likes, so I'll come back with more videos about Solomon. So come on guys, let's hit the target. Also comment, "With the wisdom that God will give me, I will become rich." Positive energy, folks, that will bring you wealth, even the positive energy from your comment. And to show that we're with you on this journey, I'll leave a heart on your comment. Okay, now let's go. Solomon was the 10th son of King David, who reigned at that time for 40 years and 6 months. King David, the same one you're thinking of, yes, he's the one who brought down the giant Goliath with a stone to the head. Brave David, he had only one stone against a giant, obviously he would be killed. But because he trusted and asked God, that stone could bring down the giant, and he became king. So he was king for 40 years, and that's how he ended up having his sons, including Solomon. Solomon was the 10th son, right? So at that time it was practically impossible for him to become king because by law the crown must be given to the first son. The first son came. Then let's say something happened to the first son. The second one would come, then the third or fourth, you understand, right? He was the last, the 10th. But something happened. Amnon, Chileab, and Absalom, who were his 3 older brothers, the first, the second, and the third, died. So the 4th son in line was Adonijah, who was ruling the kingdom. When David started getting older, Adonijah then started kind of remotely commanding. Things in the kingdom were running. However, at that time, a prophet, Nathan, came and spoke to David. The new leader should be Solomon, the 10th son, who was very young at the time for that. At the time, Adonijah tried everything to stay in power but couldn't, and he swore to respect the command of his younger brother Solomon. But what happened at the time, when a king died, whoever took his place also took his harem. They had many women, they had a lot of women indeed. So David's harem would be given by the new king, and Adonijah was already involved with a woman at the time. He wanted to stay with this woman, wanted to make this relationship with the woman an excuse to continue being the king. Solomon, when he ascended and became king, even though very young, there was a confusion. It's not known if he was 18 or 20 years old, but it was around that age. He became king and ordered the killing of his brother Adonijah. His brother was killed because of it. It was a time when people died more easily. It was harder to be a person at that time, so to speak. And that's how Solomon reigned from 971 BC to 931 BC. I'll explain. The order of the dates is decreasing because it's BC. So in the countdown, it would be from 971 to 931. And just like his father, 40 years of reign, what happened? Solomon is an intelligent, very wise person. One day God spoke to him in a dream and said, "You can ask for whatever you want." And he replied, I want to have the greatest wisdom in the world so I can govern a people and be very wise. I want wisdom. And God liked his request, so God gave him that wisdom. Of course, this is a summary of what happened, and so he became the wisest man in the world at that time. He was great at trade, negotiation, and began to amass much wealth. Obviously, he wouldn't be poor anymore because he was already king, but he began to amass much wealth beyond what he already had. He began to invest, for example, in salt extraction there at the Dead Sea. He started working with that. A curiosity. Did you know that the word salary has its origin in the Latin salarium, which means payment with salt, in literal translation, price with salt? At the time, payment with salt was common, so they really used salt as if it were people's salary, more or less. And he basically had one of these stations literally extracting money from the ground. With that, he generated much wealth. He started sending this salt to Ethiopia, to India, and he also commanded a good portion of trade in Arabia. According to reports based on the Bible, Solomon received 25 tons of gold in just 1 year. 25 tons of gold equivalent to $240 million. Perhaps it doesn't seem like much money. But considering the time Solomon lived in, we're talking about a lot of money, a whole lot. Solomon had numerous businesses, numerous sources of wealth. It is estimated that at his peak, he had 3,400 tons of gold, which when converted into dollars, who knows, he might have had a few trillions of dollars. He had a temple built of gold. Indeed, the first temple made for God in Jerusalem was built by him. He built a gigantic temple, which took 7 years to be completed. He negotiated with the king of Tyre, a region known as Iran, establishing a strong connection with the king's family. Solomon, in turn, negotiated very well with him, even exchanging 4 tons of gold for land, a lot of land. Solomon possessed a phenomenal land, which covered a vast, gigantic area. So Iran, who was doing business with Solomon, sent several slaves to Solomon to work on the construction of this great temple. And Solomon, in return, gave oil and some grains he also had. Amazing, because he took salt to various places and brought back a lot in return. But remember when I said that Solomon was the wisest man in the world? This was one of the businesses that made him generate wealth the most. Because he was very wise, Solomon had a lot of influence and consequently earned a lot of gold. Perhaps the most famous episode in Solomon's history is the episode from the beginning of his reign, when he heard that there was a problem in the middle of the city there. In the community, 2 women had given birth on the same day and lived together. One slept on her son and killed him. During the night, she exchanged her dead son for the living son of the other. To resolve the case, they went to Solomon. One said that the living son was hers, and the other also claimed the same. Remembering that this is just a summary, so be it. The king ordered the child to be cut in half, giving half of the child to each woman. One of the women agreed and the other did not, saying they could give the child to the other woman, but please not kill the boy. Solomon concluded, "This is a true mother who loves her child to the point of giving another person to spare him from death, and handed the child to his true mother." This case earned him much respect among his people. The name Solomon generated much expectation in people due to his great respect and fame. Remember, I was talking about this Iran. This Iran also recommended another very important guy, who is Hiram Abif, who is another Iran. He is a symbol within Freemasonry. In the Masonic community, he is talked about a lot because he was a Freemason. He was the guy and the architects of the Temple of Solomon, which is one of the most sought-after temples. At one point in his life, Solomon began to spend his wealth on women. It's true he had one because he already had 700 women in his harem and about 300 concubines, like 1,000 women. That's a lot of women for one guy, isn't it? What do you think? Tell me in the comments. He had 1,000 women, all covered in gold, with the most expensive clothes, with the most expensive adornments. And these women, some of them, began to distance him from God, according to what is said in the Bible. And so, when he was distanced from God, he lost wisdom. And his sons, who were supposed to be wise, also lost wisdom. And Solomon's son, named Rehoboam, and Jeroboam, son of Nebat, from the tribe of Ephraim, divided the kingdom. The kingdom went on until it broke for good. The kingdom broke, and 5 centuries later, both the temple and the palace where Solomon existed were destroyed. Afterwards, they were rebuilt, but were destroyed again in the year 70 AD. After that, only the wall remained, the famous Western Wall. A very interesting and knowledgeable story, isn't it? Anyway, after this brief summary, perhaps not so brief, but knowledge is never too much, let's move on to the 7 principles of King Solomon. Enough studying those who have tens of thousands of dollars, those who have millions of dollars, those who have billions of dollars, those who have billions of dollars. Now we will study those who have or have had trillions of dollars. King Solomon, the wisest and richest person to ever inhabit this planet. Before we begin with the principles that I've separated here that Solomon teaches us, I would like to ask you for something very important. Your like, of course, it costs you nothing and also helps our channel to grow and discern quality content through YouTube. And don't forget to comment on what you think of the video. Solomon wrote the book of Proverbs. It's an incredible book, especially if you seek wisdom, to increase your level of wisdom and discernment to improve various areas of your life. Without further ado, let's start here with the first principle. The first principle is, wisdom condemns false merit. Let's go. What is merit? Merit has to do with you achieving something because you added value in some way. So, we make a video here, it reaches 1 million people, and the editor edited this video. This video was edited, right? This video was well edited, with a well-crafted script, and it reached you. So, this video, it was very good, it added value to you, it brings a result. That's merit. What is false merit? False merit is when you want something without actually deserving it. For example, you are in a job where you work 9 hours a day, and you believe you deserve to earn more. Simply because without considering whether your work is really that difficult or vital. Or like, you won the lottery. Oh, but you can't win without playing. At least he played. It's his merit for betting. He deserves it. No, statistically speaking, impossible. There's no merit in that. So, false merit is when you didn't add value and this happened, or when you think you deserve it without adding enough value. When you work for a company, for example, you didn't add value, you didn't have a result, but because of some politics there, some shady stuff, sometimes you got the money. That's false merit. And why does wisdom disapprove of false recognition? Because if you lack discernment, that result you obtained without producing something in return, it evaporates. Just look at the number of individuals who participate in the lottery and fail because it's not worth receiving something without being ready for it. Not being someone who possesses wisdom because you won't keep that wealth with you. So it's pointless. The only route is the route of wisdom. If you don't become more enlightened, you'll lose what you've achieved effortlessly. Second principle, those who do not seek wisdom stumble into the unknown. What does this mean? It means that when you don't seek wisdom, in some cases knowledge, what happens is that you tread a path, and because of the lack of wisdom, of you not having knowledge, which are two different things, and you're on a path you don't know where it leads, you'll stumble. You always stumble on the path. In fact, here's a great tip right away, which is you should never walk alone, because if you don't walk alone, when you stumble, you'll have someone to hold on to. But on this path, what happens if you don't know where you're going? You'll stumble several times, and without wisdom, knowledge, you don't know what made you stumble. So if you're going to invest your money and you don't have knowledge, you don't have wisdom, you're going to make mistakes. But sometimes you'll think you made a mistake because the dollar fell, or because the dollar rose, or because China did something, or because something changed in politics, etc. However, in some situations, the real problem may lie in the lack of knowledge, resulting in the misunderstanding of inappropriate financial decisions. Personally, I have made several financial mistakes, initially attributing them to a specific cause, only to later discover that the root of the problem was another, thanks to my efforts to study and learn from these experiences. Third principle is foolishness. Do you know what a foolish person is? A foolish person is someone who, when they know what they should do and they don't, is the one who, aware of what they should do, chooses not to do it. If they are unaware of what to do, they are considered ignorant. Many viewers of this video may reflect, wow, what would it be like to have watched this video when younger? So they didn't invest because they were ignorant. The person who knows they need to invest and yet doesn't is foolish. An overweight person who knows they need to exercise and diet and yet doesn't is a foolish person. For example, so have discipline, as Solomon said. Discipline is the tool to combat foolishness. Without discipline, you break the diet, you stop investing to spend money on frivolities or even spend money on casino games, I know. Jokes aside, let's go to the fourth principle. The fourth principle is the principle of laziness. Look here. Lazy hands make for poverty. So what he means here is this. That person who is lazy and doesn't get anywhere, who procrastinates in everything, who puts off everything, from the day they'll invest, even to the day they'll start the gym. Success doesn't accept laziness. In other words, that's because laziness and sloth make a person poor. Fifth principle, plant your seeds and don't depend on just one of them. Let's go. Do you know what convexity means? Convexity is something convex. An action can turn to dust or multiply several times. The problem is that if you invest in a single stock, if it falls, you've lost 100% of what you had. That's why you need to diversify your investments. If you invested in 10 stocks, one fell 100%, 8 doubled in value, and one stayed at the same level, you won't suffer losses. The seed is a metaphor for planting to harvest later. What's the problem here? Many people only want the fruit. You know that relative who asks to borrow money from you, they're only taking the fruit. Or that person who works at a company and only gets a little of the outcome, they're satisfied with that. They always need to live off that fruit, never have any left over to plant, or they never have to invest before consuming the fruit, because that's how the person survives. But if you don't have any seeds left to plant, you can't grow, and you remain dependent on what you're doing. That's why you always have to plant different seeds, because sometimes one seed won't grow, but another will. That will grow and give you many fruits. And if you follow the flow, some of these fruits you eat and others you can replant. It's like investments. A part is dividends in the future that we use to survive. Another part we leave to invest. Sixth principle of Solomon. Working hard is not always enough. Why? Because effort is part of the trajectory that will bring you prosperity. On the other hand, only working is not enough. If you don't add value and don't scale what you do, you need to have merit. Merit has more to do with how much you earn than with the effort you put in. But of course, in the equation, effort will enhance the result you generate, and therefore the result you'll have. It's an old maxim: if you dig a hole, so what? You'll be all sweaty, tired, dirty, but you haven't added value to anyone. That's the point. You need to add value. You need to be in a meritocratic environment, and you need to scale what you do. The seventh and final principle is that wisdom is not knowledge. So we can look at several people who invest in the stock market. They have a lot of knowledge. People have a lot of knowledge indeed. When you talk to one of them, you feel stupid. Oh my goodness, I don't know anything. I spent so much time not knowing anything, and the person knows much more than you. They're full of knowledge. But it doesn't mean they'll be the best investor in the long run, because you also need wisdom. Wisdom has to do with something much more than knowledge. It's about your experience. It's about practice, action. Wisdom is putting knowledge into practice and getting good results, and that only happens when you have practical experience in the things you do. Knowledge alone is theoretical. It becomes wisdom only when you put it into practice and bear good fruit. Imagine you want to get your driver's license without taking lessons, claiming that you already know how to drive very well because you're the best at playing GTA. Yes, you theoretically have good knowledge of driving a car or a motorcycle, but does it work in practice? No, because you've never driven a real car in practice. Theoretically, you can be the best, but in practice, I don't think so. I hope you'll forgive me for the simplistic analogy. But my intention here is to make things as clear and easy to understand as possible. I hope you enjoyed the video because it's come to an end, but our conversation continues in the comments section. Until next time, and God bless.